Hey everyone, I just thought I'd pop at the start of this episode just to give a bit of a massive thank you to you all for continuing to listen to this podcast. I have had some personal stuff go down, which has meant that I've not been able to post as super consistently. I've had to take a bit of an unannounced hiatus, but I'm back, and episodes should be back regularly every week from now on in. It's been a bit of a rough time, and I wanted to really also thank the Deus Ex Media team. They've all been really helpful in helping me through this and supporting me in the decisions I've had to make, and it's been a really great source of comfort and help through making just tough decisions like this. The podcast isn't going anywhere permanently. I still plan on making podcasts as long as I'm able to and as long as I'm happy doing it. But I've had to take a bit of a break. As a result, I probably will be continuing posting all the way through into 2025. At least that's my plan. We'll see. I've got some amazing guests lined up for 2024, including some great returning guests, some fan favorites, and even a couple of really interesting new guests. This podcast that is coming up was recorded a couple months ago, and I want to thank Bobby for just being so patient with me for jumping on this podcast and working with me. I haven't gotten around to editing it till now, and it still sounds really amazing, and I really enjoyed being able to chat with people. And now that the hardest of the stuff has passed, I am able to get back to editing and putting together conversations like this more consistently. And I hope you really enjoy the content that comes over the next few months. I'm really looking forward to creating it. Thank you.
A podcast to honor the gods.
This better come with a sacrifice.
Deus Ex Media.
Content and Capable recognises the Indigenous people on the land of which we record this podcast on, the Bowendig people. We offer a respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Sovereignty was never ceded. Welcome to Content and Capable, the podcast where, if you're not careful, you might be asked to clean up the dishes because the dishwasher broke. My name's Sam, I'm your host, and joining me all the way from Canada and this podcast wore tennis shoes, is Bobby. Hi, Bobby.
Hey, Sam. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you. Can you explain a little bit about this podcast wore tennis shoes and what it's all about?
Okay, so the podcast Wore Tennis Shoes is a show where me and two of my good friends, Sean and Rob, attempt the impossible task of watching and reviewing every single film on Disney+. I believe we just hit episode 50 or 60. We're in the 50s now of like episode 1582, so we're never going to get ahead. It seems like the odds are stacked against us, but damned if we're not going to try.
I appreciate the effort. Like it's no mean feat. Sorry, to be able to even just attempt such a backlog.
It doesn't help. It doesn't help that they keep adding stuff every week too.
Oh yeah. I don't know. I feel like Disney Plus. It's fascinating because in Australia, Disney Plus is different to, and I'm guessing in Canada it is too, to the States. I always end up in the States on Disney Plus, and it locks me out of all my favourite TV shows because they're all on Hulu. So I end up being very frustrated for the periods of time I'm in the States going, I can't watch it, it's on Hulu, and I'm not paying for a subscription just for the 2 or 3 weeks I'm in the country.
Well, that's the funny thing about Canadian Disney Plus is that we don't get Hulu up in Canada either. So specific to Canadian Disney Plus, we have a channel called Star, and that's where they put a lot of the Fox and a lot of the Hulu things. We actually just watched the film this morning that we're going to be reviewing on the podcast. And in the States is a Hulu original, but on Canadian Disney Plus it comes up as a Star original.
Yes, I'm very used to it, like very used to that Star logo, because it's just everything I watch at the moment. It comes from them. I think it's just fascinating the way that I think, especially for like people who are so close to the US culturally, like in Canada and in Australia, how different like our media licensing looks like as compared to, you know, what the norm would be in the States.
Well, and we also up here, we have we actually have legislation like that, the Canadian content legislation, or CanCon as most people call it, that dictates whatever platform you're on. Like radio especially, it's like they have to have like 30 or 50% Canadian content and television shows as well, and that's actually been something our federal government have been looking into, was like places like Netflix and other streaming services were setting up offices or studios in Canada, and our government was like, great, start producing more Canadian content if you want to be up here.
Yeah. That's a really hard part as well, I think. We're kind of desperate for just people to come film in Australia. So they did a lot of the Marvel stuff over here. So all of the Thor stuff happens to be one of the Hemsworths live like, you know, a couple of hours away from the largest studio in the country. So they filmed all of the Thor movies out here. And it was this fascinating thing that they're really excited for it. But at the same time, they're investigating in kind of the same way of like, how can we better like ensure that Australian content is being prioritized? Because the legislation hasn't kept up with streaming. On TV, you've still got to have a certain percentage, and I work in radio, and radio's got to have a certain percentage, but it's just such a fascinating like little corner of content creating world that a lot of people aren't aware of.
Yeah, especially like I have an acting career on the side as well, and so like learning that side of the business is always really interesting.
Yeah. How did you guys start the podcast? What was the idea that kicked it all off?
So I'm going to give full credit to Sean on this one. Sean being the main host of the show. It was actually his idea. And on my end, I'd been living in British Columbia on the west coast of Canada for the better part of a decade. And my wife and I just moved back home to Saskatoon. And kind of right around the time for me, I was starting to get a sense of like what the acting scene was like here, if I wanted to keep pursuing like a career in that. Sean just reached out of nowhere and said, hey, Rob and I are starting this podcast called The Podcast Wore Tennis Shoes, where we're going to try and watch everything on Disney Plus. And, you know, would you be interested in being a part of that? And without hesitation, my answer was yes, because I just kind of before the pandemic was when I really started getting more into podcasts, because suddenly I found myself with more time on my hands and I needed something to fill that void.
Yeah.
And it was a new challenge for me. And like, I'm the type of performer where like, I like challenges. So I was like, great, this is something new and something to learn. So yeah, I just jumped right in with them.
How steep was that learning curve jumping onto a podcast? You know, a slightly different medium often to, you know, what we think of in terms of the acting sphere.
It was interesting at first because the first thing that like we all tried to organize was, and the first couple episodes, I'm just using like a JBL gaming headset mic, whereas like Sean and Rob actually had like Yeti mics with proper setup for the first little while. So my audio was a little bit different. The thing that actually drove me the craziest when we first started recording was trying to find a room with the least echo, because the house where my wife and I live is like all hardwood floors, which is great for recording.
Yeah. Yeah, so great.
And so it was me going through every single room in my house until I found myself in the guest room closet that I'm currently recording from, which has just enough space for me to set up a laptop, the Yeti mic that Jean purchased for me, so we'd all be using the same gear, and I'm behind two closed doors, so it muffles most of the audio in the house. And the linen shelf I'm recording on doesn't hurt that either.
Yeah, I think I've been really lucky in that. The last place I lived in before the one... not the last one, the one before that, when I was living back in Brisbane where my parents live, I had hardwood floors, but I was lucky. I just like the room was so small that my bed took up so much space that it was like it wasn't super echoey, and I just like made sure that there was lots of like cushiony stuff around. I've seen people have some like, especially voice actors have like some impressive setups. They're like, when they move house, there's like this whole ordeal of all of this like foam board and soundproofing, and I can't even like, I don't even have the patience to go through the rigmarole of making sure my mic is optimized sometimes. So it's I don't know, some people put so much effort in, and I kudos to them, but I find it very hard. It
is, and like that's something on my end too. Like I don't the technical side of things, like, isn't more my forte. So, like, that was kind of a struggle for me of, like, and, like, again, Sean's been really good about, like, you know, helping us, you know, figure out gain settings and, like, setups and stuff like that on his end. He actually lives in Toronto on the other side of the country from us, so there's been a few times where it's like there's a few awkward, like, meetings where it's like, well, I think based on where your computer is, you should be able to do this.
It's, for me, I'm guessing it's pretty similar in the States and Canada. We've got a few time zones, and the problem is that we've got less states, much like, you know, the provinces and territories in Canada. We got less of them, and so when some of them decide to not follow daylight savings, it becomes a bit of a hassle. So I have moved. So I'm recording at the moment in Brisbane, where we don't follow daylight savings. I lived in Victoria, which does follow daylight savings, but otherwise would be on the same time zone as Brisbane. And then I've just moved to South Australia, which is on half an hour behind, but is on daylight savings. So it's actually half an hour in front of Brisbane, who isn't on daylight savings. It's just this whole thing. And I, like, scheduling, I've only had to schedule, you know, 6 or 7 recordings since moving, and it's just been, like, nightmarish at this point in time. I've lost all, like, bearing as to what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. One day I'll sit down and, like, go, yeah, it's this number of hours plus a day on either side, and it's just, I don't know, I'm ready to, like, give up, to be honest.
That did actually happen. I did a guest spot on the Press Play podcast, another film review podcast out of the States, and they said, you on Central Standard Time? I said, yeah, like 7 p.m. Yeah, 7 p.m. works great. And sure enough, at 6 p.m. on my phone, I get a message being like, hey, we're ready to record, where are you? And I was like, they're on Central Standard Time, but they moved because they're on daylight savings. In Saskatchewan, it's always on Central Standard Time because we don't shift. And so I had to run upstairs and be like, sorry, guys, we're a little behind in Canada. And, like, it was all good, but I still felt bad about it.
I still think, I think podcasters are probably some of the most forgiving people for running late. I was recording the other day, and I just, like, I hadn't scheduled things properly, and I ate breakfast, and it was like 10 minutes before, and Dad turned around to me and was like, so you got about 10 minutes before your podcast recording? I'm like, yeah, I'm all set up, I'm ready to go, you know. And he turns around to me and he goes, you got like 3 minutes. I'm like, yeah. I just started eating breakfast. So I get halfway through breakfast and I'm like, okay, it's on the hour. I think I'm gonna hit in to record. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry for being late, you know. And they're like, you're like a minute late. It means nothing. I think we're just so used to being on Zoom calls sometimes. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, one of the first film sets I was ever on when I was going to school for theater, one of the instructors I had at the college, our film and television instructor actually cast the entire class's background because he was like, hey, this is, you know, we'll do it on, like, weekends, like, when you've got some time. He said, but this is great on-set experience. And the very first set I was ever on forgot to reset the clocks for daylight savings because I was living in Ontario and I'm a Saskatchewan boy. So I was over an hour late to the first film shoot I was ever on.
I love that. Love that. It's all over the place. I find it funny. Broadcast journalism is like the loosest with time ever. I work in radio, but I've had friends who work in TV and stuff. It'll be like 30 seconds before you're live on air, and all of a sudden you see all of the journalists who are supposed to be live on air running through the studio going, yep, we're ready to go. We have news headlines that are syndicated statewide, so we don't touch them. I live in a small country town, and so our shows don't start until like 5 past the hour. And one of the hosts, she does like the country hour. She is notoriously really great at just like cutting things quite last minute. And it'll be like 12:04, and she's like, the printer's not working. I can't print any of my scripts. And we're all like, I'm a producer. I'm like, I'm getting anxiety by proxy. I'm like, is the show going to go to air? Are we running on time? And it's just like at that point in time, it's like, whatever, it'll exist. It's just such a fascinating, like, I don't know, fast and loose with time is just such a fascinating part that, you know, I just remember it being shoved down my throat that I had to be on time all the time. No one cares if you're late when you're an adult. I No one cares if I'm late, and no one cares if I don't, if I turn up late. Like, wow, what a tangent to go up down. So how did you get into acting? Was that something you always wanted to do?
It's something I'd always enjoyed. Like, growing up at my mom's house, movie night was a big thing for us. It was like, Friday or Saturday nights, depending on what was going on. We'd either go see movies, or we would just rent a movie and sit and have popcorn. So it's just always been like a part of growing up. And it was something that always interested me. And I wasn't until I was like, I'd say like just about getting out of high school, again, tying this all back together, Sean is also a playwright. And he'd written some plays in high school, and when we were getting out of high school, he'd said, hey, we're gonna, do you guys have the Fringe Festival in Australia as well? I know it's usually a worldwide thing. So the Fringe Festival in Saskatoon, we were putting on a play at the youth stage, and he said, hey, the end of 12th grade, I ended up like having a role in like the high school version of the play, and then it was going to be on the youth stage in the Fringe, and Sean said, hey, would you be willing to, do it again? And then the year after, Sean wrote another play, and we were no longer youths by that point, so we were on the real stage. So I'd done some done some theater with Sean and Rob. Again, because Sean and I have been friends since we were 8 years old. We met Rob in high school, so we've known each other for a long time. And then kind of when I was in my early 20s, I remember I was working at what we in Canada know as Value Village, but I believe you in Australia will know as Savers.
Oh, the name rings a bell. Might be a bit old, but we got Salvos and Vinnies.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Anyway.
We got, so many thrift stores, it's not even funny.
But I was working there at the time, and I remember people had said, like, go into trades, that's where the money is. And I was like, that doesn't sound very fun. And I'd kind of been, like, humming and hawing the idea of, like, going back to school. And I remember chatting with one of my supervisors about it, and she kind of said, well, you know what, Bob, like, whether you pick a trade or even if you go into theater or if you decide that's not what you want, you've always got a promising career here at Value Village. And in that moment, my mind went, go to school. Because I don't want to be stuck at this thrift department store for the rest of my life. Yeah. And so I ended up going to college for theater, and, like, that's kind of what really ignited me. And I just enjoyed I enjoy acting. I enjoy performing. I like the chemistry of people. The thing I like about theater is, like, to me, it's organized chaos. Is everything is going wrong at every minute, or at least it feels that way sometimes. But the audience doesn't know that. And the thing I like about doing plays is you're doing a slightly different show every single night. And again, like, you miss lines, things get jumped, things jump around. The audience doesn't know that. And so you walk out being like, oh, that was a bad performance. And someone will be like, oh, that was great. And you're like, oh, right, I forgot. You don't know that I fucked up that line. You don't know that, like, we skipped, like, half the dialogue in that one scene.
Yeah.
And then it's just kind of been a thing I've done on the side since, like, up until very recently, I had an agent, but something that kind of clicked in my life very recently was that, like, going out for, like, random commercials and things like that just wasn't something that, like, I was enjoying. And I have more fun just working with friends and, and just, like, kind of doing things for fun and doing things I want to do. So it's just been a thing I've been doing for, like, the past, oh God, how old am I now? About 15, 17 years.
Wow. And I suppose, obviously, your relationship with that and then its context with everything else is, like, with the podcast as well. So you've got a bit of expertise then coming in, the three of you, going to Disney Plus. Why Disney Plus as compared to other streaming services?
I think that's just the one Sean picked, and I don't know if that was just because, like, I think Disney Plus at the time was starting to pick up steam. They were getting more streaming. We also had it too where, like, things that, like, when Disney was kind of dipping their toes in the water and seeing how their streaming things go, as soon as Disney Plus popped up, they'd started pulling away things from Netflix and other streaming services they had. And I think there was just kind of a nice variety of content to go with. And again, I think, like, most people my age, like, or probably, like, your age as well, like, we all grew up watching Disney movies, so there's some familiarity to go with that too.
Yeah. Was it surprising some of the films that are within Disney's catalog that you didn't realize were within their wheelhouse?
The thing that's really fascinating, I didn't really kind of understand until I got more of it, was the different studios they had outside of the normal brand. Like, it wasn't until we started the podcast I realized that Touchstone was an arm of Disney. And that was something else they used to put up more adult content, or that Hollywood Pictures was another Disney studio they had that they put things out. And, like, I find that part of it very interesting. And then also, like, again, something all the Disney Channel original movies that we just didn't get here in Canada because you couldn't get the Disney Channel up here.
Yeah. I think that's a really fascinating part, is that, like, there is a part of culture that, like, I remember watching, like, a video essay about, like, the High School Musical movies. And I think the third one premiered on the Disney Channel. Like, it was a Disney Channel original movie, and it kind of kickstarted, though, that, like, era of Disney Channel original movies. And I just, like, remember going, we just didn't get that. We got a theatrical release of DVDs. Like, that was just quintessentially, like, not within our wheelhouse. And it's just such an interesting part that I just don't even think about sometimes, about, you know, what that might look like in bits and pieces.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like there was also this whole thing that, like, I didn't watch a lot of them, but I brought it up on the show a few times that during, like, the 90s, there was this kind of little pocket of people in Canada illegally stealing American satellite signals. And so I was able to watch Disney Channel stuff at my dad's because at the time it wasn't illegal. You could just hijack signals from the States. And so I would watch Disney Channel stuff every so often. So I was like, and we're aware of it, but yeah, I didn't, like, again, like a lot of these, like you say, these big cultural phenomenons, like, just completely missed.
Oh yeah, and you sit there and you can understand where, like, people have come from after you watch it, but, like, you don't even realize how, like, ubiquitous and assumed knowledge it is when it comes to, like, references and popular culture. There are points where I sit down and watch, like, an episode of SNL, and I'm like, that joke went right over my head. I have no idea what you're referencing here, just because I haven't lived that experience.
And that's another thing too. It's like my entire group of friends, like, a show that really stuck with us when we were in high school was the show Clone High. Because it was like a partnered deal where it was like being broadcast on a network called Teletoon in Canada, and then, like, MTV in the States. And in the States, the show got canceled after, like, 1 or 2 episodes. But it kept running in Canada, and Teletoon played it. So, like, within our high school, like, that show was really popular. And we've just kind of realized that, like, we reference it all the time, and it's been like 20 years of us referencing the show. That, like, of course, they've brought the show back and they've had 2 seasons of it now, but it was like, again, just kind of this funny thing that, like, oh, in Canada we were able to watch that show, like, legally, and, like, you didn't have to stream it or anything, it was just on TV.
I just, like, even, it's fascinating because obviously, well, I don't know how obvious this is, in Australia, whatever the Canadian Children's Broadcasting Studio was, and the BBC kind of all just circulated children's TV programming. And so there are so many, like, shows I remember watching that are, like, cornerstones of Canadian children and British children's, like, upbringing, of these, like, random TV shows that I watched, you know, on TV as a kid. And it's just such a weird and fascinating part of developing, you know, our culture. Like, we shared all of these deeply, you know, almost Commonwealthy like, you know, bits and pieces. Very weird. Yeah,
I'm actually, like, I was actually born in England and moved to Canada with my mom when I was very young, so that was the fun thing with, because in Canada, like, would have been CBC that broadcasts a lot of those, like the Canadian Broadcasting Network, and so I would catch some of those, like, old British shows that I remembered from when I was young, or my mom would be like, oh, this is this show, yeah, this was on when you were a kid. I do also have memory of an Australian kid show called Round the Twist that CBC used to watch.
We love it.
And I loved that show as a kid, and I'm so happy that you know what that is.
It's one I'll get my citizenship taken away from me if I'm not careful. But I have never seen Round the Twist. I appreciate it. It's a cultural cornerstone. So many people my age watched it. My parents did this thing of, when they upgraded all the TV signals along the east coast of Australia, we didn't swap over until the last TV station stopped broadcasting in the old signal. And then when it swapped over, Mum and Dad finally went and got someone to go and swap the channels over so we could get, you know, TV. And it swapped to, like, a digital format from what I'm aware of. And I just, like, I vividly remember we had to watch, I think it was Channel 10. And that was it. That was all that played. Like, every other channel had swapped over, and that was the only thing. Everything else was, like, grey static. And it was, I did not watch a lot of, like, what was considered popular TV, because we only had one channel for, like, a good year and a half while we were Well, we were living, we were living in a rental at that point because we were building a house, and it was just such a. You just forget that sometimes there are moments in time where, like, you're almost like forced to not participate in a cultural phenomenon, which almost feels like, un-Australian, almost.
Well, it's funny like that here too, because before like the days of streaming and everything, if you didn't have basic cable in Canada, or at least in Saskatchewan, I imagine it was the same everywhere, you had 4 channels. You had like Global, there was like CTV, CBC, and then there was also the French version of CBC, so you had all of those. And something in Canada that is like actually somewhat, I don't know if it still is a thing, but like the movie Happy Gilmore would play yearly every summer on CBC, and it was like a very bonding thing amongst Canadians, where like, I swear, like most Canadians have seen Happy Gilmore and would watch it every summer because CBC would just play it every year at the same time. So I have really fond memories of that movie.
Yeah. It's just, and it's weird because it's things like that. I vividly remember they would run like marathons of Harry Potter or the Star Wars movies or the Shrek movies over the summer on like consecutive Friday nights at like 6:30. And the problem is when you watch TV or when you watch a movie on free-to-air TV, is it's not the 90-minute movie anymore. It's a 3-4 hour affair with ads.
Yeah.
And it was just like, my mother, like, she used to refuse to let us watch the second movie of the night, which often started at like 8:30, 9 o'clock, was a little bit more mature. And as we got older, we got more and more frustrated. But you would be in front of that TV until like 11 o'clock at night. And Mum's like, there's no way. You guys are going to be up like the next morning. I don't want you like sleeping in. So it was this whole thing. Just, it's fascinating how like, and like we only had, initially we also only had 4 channels, I think. Yeah, so we had 7, 9, and 10, which were like our commercial stations. We had the ABC, and then, we had a 5th one, the SBS. So that was all. That's all you had. And the SBS was like multicultural. It was a bit out there. It was also a little bit more adult. And the ABC like had dedicated kids and news programming and bits and pieces. But the commercial stations like were all over the place. And it was just so funny to see just how different each of the approaches were as well. So interesting.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
So you started the podcast. What were some of like the most interesting things that like you've come across, in exploring the whole catalog of Disney Plus?
There's like it's fun, like some of the older movies on Disney Plus. Like I remember again, so in Canada, another way to watch Disney things was The Wonderful World of Disney would air Sunday nights on CBC, and that was usually followed by a few episodes of a cartoon. So it'd either be like DuckTales and Tailspin, or like Darkwing Duck and something else, and then followed by whatever movie Disney was showing. And so like I was really happy when I found Darby O'Gill and the Little People was up on Disney Plus, because that was one of the movies my mom had taped off TV, and so I was interested to see like how the film had like, how this film aged, like is it what I remember it to be? And also again, like we had it taped with ads, so like remembering it without the ads and the things that were cut out. It's interesting going back into like some of the older Disney, like some of the, like, there's the classic Disney films, but then there's kind of like the 70s and 80s. And like, I think something most people don't really get is that Disney wasn't always the powerhouse that it is today. And it kind of went through these like ups and downs of like John had even kind of said it. It's like they'd have one banger, they'd have flop, 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 banger, flop, flop, flop. And like some of the lesser known films are like other films they are making to compete with other studios are interesting. Like the first movie we watched was The Black Hole, which is very obviously Disney trying to get it on Star Wars, which of course then flash forward 40 years later, they would just buy the studio so they could get the franchise.
Yeah. Funny, but I love that. Did you like ever... Was there something that like a movie that you watched and was like, whoa, like this is just not good? Like, is there stuff that Disney has on there that you're like, whoa, I can't even believe that they put this on?
I mean, a lot of the Disney Channel original movies are like pretty atrocious. Every time we threaten to ban Rob, he comes back with a threat of like making us watch another Disney Channel original film. There's like these interesting ones. Like there's Babes in Toyland, which is this weird, almost like filming of a stage musical, which I personally found like quite horrible. But it's an interesting point. It's like kind of when Disney started dipping their toes into like kind of like more what we think of like some of the more live action Disney films. And again, like some of the research Sean has done on that is very interesting, like how Disney had originally got the rights to do the later Wizard of Oz books, but not the first one. Like, was Universal or Warner who bought the rights? Oh, MGM had the rights for the first Wizard of Oz books, but not the rest of them. And so Walt Disney bought the rights to every single other book in the series and then backed out last minute. And instead was like, well, already have the sets and everything. Let's just do Babes in Toyland.
Wow, yeah.
And like, and again, I find like some of that stuff, like I find like some of these like weirder older films interesting, or like weird ones nobody talks about, like $1 Million Duck, about a guy who finds a goose that gets shot with radiation that suddenly starts laying golden eggs, and like the Federal Reserve starts coming after him because it's like illegal to hold more than a certain amount of gold. Which again, Sean's research on that episode is very interesting, because for context, we're like, why does the government care about this gold? And Sean was like, because there was a legal limit to how much gold you could have, and he was over the limit because he had the goose that laid the golden eggs. And we're like, oh, that's why this movie makes no sense now.
It's almost giving like Into the Woods kind of like crazy, like contrived plot energy with like, you know, obviously like it's a real law, but like at the same time it's like, wow, it's it's just so interesting. I don't know, are you still active as an actor?
I am, yeah. I'm actually heading out to the West Coast to go shoot a little fan film with someone I'd worked on before I moved back to Saskatchewan, and he very recently reached out and said, hey, do you want to film something else? So going to be working on that. As well, too, like I shot a feature with some friends on the coast as well. I lived in on Vancouver Island for like the better part of a decade and got like pretty engrossed in the local film scene there. So that's like kind of where I do some of my acting. And not to say there's some like great people. The scene in Saskatchewan is full of like really young, hungry people that like Saskatchewan isn't really thought of as like having like a film scene, but there's a group of like young filmmakers that are like really trying to change that.
Yeah. How has like being a part of this podcast and exploring an extensive and very, as we've established, very varied backlog of films kind of influenced your acting career?
So this is something a friend of mine had said, who also works in the film industry, but he works more on the production side of things, is that when you work in film, like whether it be in front of the camera or behind the camera, it changes the way you watch movies. And so like I sit there and look at I watch actors' choices. I sit there and look at the way they do things, and like there's also like little actor ticks you pick up on as an actor that you know about them because you've done them yourself, and then you see other people doing them, and you're like, I have another friend who's an actor who he joked about watching shows that like when actors have things they do all the time and you notice it and suddenly you can't stop noticing it, and it just takes you out of the film, because every time you're like, stop clenching your jaw, just release your jaw tension and be present in the scene. But it's just a little thing that you pick up on. And same with like the technical side of things too. It's like you kind of watch films a little differently, and so I find it very fascinating watching like some of these older films and older performances, especially from like the 60s, when like like what we kind of consider realism, like it had come into place. Like you already had Brando and those people, and like the method was like already being used. And so I kind of find like watching the performances of these actors like grow over time very interesting. Especially knowing like I sat in a workshop with a director who talked about working in film and the differences of working within film and TV. And he was saying that like up until like the 90s or early 2000s, TV wasn't really taken as a serious genre. It's like you didn't get a lot of coverage. It's like, we shot The Master, we shot a bit of coverage, like, okay, that's it, we're moving on, it's just TV, nobody cares. And so like kind of knowing that, like watching some of the Disney Channel original movies, you're like, okay, they didn't put a lot of money into this, they're just putting this out to put it out.
It's really fascinating. It's something I've only really become aware of in the last like maybe year or two. And it's fascinating because I've worked in radio for 5 years, and it's one of those things where you say something on live radio and yes, it's recorded, and yes, there's archives of it, but like it's been and gone. Whatever mistake you've made, it's moved on. No one really cares. on live radio. And it's the same on live TV. And I remember watching a couple of documentaries and like video essays about Community. It was one of my favourite TV shows, and about the pace of filming and how fast that they were moving and how that impacted the actors. And I didn't even think about it, the fact that, you know, when you film a feature-length movie, you often spend, you know, months filming, and, you know, to try to get, you know, 25, 30 episodes of a TV series out in a year, of course you've got to be filming basically an episode a week, and, you know, rolling scripts and sets and, you know, everything through as fast as you possibly can to get these things churned out basically on a production line.
And yeah, like I know like a lot of shot like stuff that was like filmed on the West Coast, like some of the made for TV movies or like other like channel things, like it's if you're like a day player or a guest spot, like you get 2 takes. They want you to get your line in 2 takes, and anything past 2 takes, the production's losing money. So like one of the instructors I had on the coast had said, you know, she's like, yeah, sure, it's great. You get to sit around on set, you get to hang out, you get to eat. She's like, when they call you, like, you got to be on, because if you don't get that in 2 takes, they're losing money, and they're going to make note of that.
Yeah. And I just like that breakneck pace. It's just such a fascinating part. Like, and I think that, I don't know, even like watching my colleagues who work in podcasting where it's a bit more permanent and bits and pieces take their time and just go, you know, I'm just going to run this as, you know, a bit of a, you know, as it comes, bits and pieces. I think that's just really important. And it's just a really fascinating part of, you know, the way that, you know, it's almost like night and day. Like, you just assume that like processes will be relatively similar across the industry, and they're just totally not.
No, and I think that's kind of the nice thing with podcasting is, for the most part, you can set your own pace. You can record as much or as little as you want to. Like, one of my favorite shows I listen to, they do 1 episode a month, and they do it at the end of the month, and sometimes they're a little late. But like, for them, that's enough. And when I get the notification that, oh, like, the Purple Stuff podcast has a new episode out, I'm like, oh, good, because like it builds up anticipation for me.
It reminds me of those YouTubers, the video essay YouTubers who will like release 1 episode in like 6 months. H-Bomber Guy is a perfect example. You know, his like plagiarism one is like a 4-hour video essay, but basically he didn't produce any content for like 6 months in the lead up to it. But everyone's gonna watch it because
Well, it's funny too, because like my main passion, the thing that I hold dearest to my heart, is I've been skateboarding since I was 13 years old. And there's kind of this phenomenon going on with like YouTube skateboarders who, like, I mean, of course, there's always divided a lot of things, and there's the people that are like, are you like a pro skateboarder? Are you a core skateboarder? Are you just like a YouTube skateboarder? But a lot of those YouTube guys, like a lot of them, they put out a video a day, because that's what they have to do in order to like make money and like be comfortable in the life they're living. And I'm like, I can't imagine putting out a YouTube video a day, like knowing the amount of content you've got to create, edit it, like that. I mean, it's like, kudos to them for the dedication. But it's like, for me, I'm like, I'm just happy to just fall on my ass with my friends and not film things.
Yeah, and like I had a professor in university who basically said, you know, for every minute of minute of audio you produce, it takes 3 minutes to edit it. And it's still the rule I run by, and it's an extra, I think it's 9 minutes for video. So every minute of a video you produce is 9 minutes of editing. And I just, like, I don't think people realize sometimes how hard it is. It's part of the reason why I don't, like, put videos of this podcast online, because, like, to edit video, to be in a place where I feel comfortable with my face going on, you know, YouTube or something weekly, is like a whole other thing. But then also, like, I record this podcast in my pajamas. I, you know, haven't washed my hair today, so it's a mess. Like, there's all sorts of things that I could think about that I would need to prepare to be able to be on a video podcast. And I look at the people who are producing video podcasts, or as you said, like daily YouTube content or things like that, I just go, kudos to you, because I don't have the ability to do that.
Yeah, and I've like sat in editing sessions, like a music video I've filmed a few years ago, and I had a friend of mine edit it, and I asked if I could sit in and like edit it with them, because I was just curious about the process. And like, Like, yeah, like it's so interesting watching an editor's job because they're looking at things. It's something another like instructor had said once to me was that the beautiful part about having an editor is like they weren't there on set. They're not tied up in any of the stuff that was going on. They're just looking for the best shots. They're looking for the best takes, and they're editing that together and making a product out of it. And I find that part of that very interesting too. And yeah, it's something like, again, on our show we've talked about video content, but it's just something that we're just like, man, like as you say, it's so much work to put into it for something that like. And like, you know, not to disparage, like we're enjoying the work we're doing, but like even just recording and editing an episode a week of the show is a lot of work, especially for Sean because he edits all the episodes.
Oh yeah, like, and I like, I'm almost jealous of like people like podcasts who have like full basically studios attached to them. I think of like, you know, the people like the Try Guys or, you know, there's so many like large podcasting groups where there is a producer, there is an editor, there is a sound engineer, there are like techs, and they're in a studio, and like I could like, that's, you know, I'm doing the work of all of those people at once.
Yeah.
Plus, you know, troubleshooting, and it's like, you know, oftentimes, especially for myself, I'm often reaching out to people who, especially when I started this podcast, who had never been on a podcast before. So it was like walking them through, you know, how they need to set up their mic from, you know, thousands of kilometers away to try to make sure that the sound quality was good and troubleshooting sound quality errors. And this is one of the reasons why, you know, there are weeks where this podcast doesn't come out, because there are sound issues that just mean that, you know, an episode with a guest just does not come out, or, you know, needs another week of me trying to troubleshoot what went wrong so I can fix it. It's just, you know, it's really, I think, yeah, the amount of effort that goes into creating something like this is really quite tough.
Well, even like like as well as like acting on camera, I also like dabbled. I've done like some grip work. I was also like, I've done like boom op. I've also done some like on set mix for a couple of films, and another sound engineer I worked with on a film where I was his boom op. A good friend of mine who works in film, I've shot a few things with him, had said like, he's like, well, you know, if you're really like, if you're looking for a sound career, he's like, post sound, they're always looking for people because nobody wants to do it, because it's a black art that nobody wants to learn.
Yeah.
And I was chatting with my friend who's a sound engineer, and he kind of said like working on big films, he was like, dude, he was like, you spend 10 hours because somebody scratched their lav and like they didn't realize it, and he's like, and no disrespect to them, like you forget you're wearing it. He's like, but it's over a really important line. He's like, you spend 10 hours getting rid of this little scratch and cleaning it up. He's like, and then you go to the premiere and like nobody knows your struggle, nobody knows that was a thing, and you're just like, man, I spent 10 hours on that, nobody cares.
Yes. And I think about it like, and part of me worries that we undervalue the work of that. Like, realistically, the reason why audio quality is so high is because people do spend 10 hours, you know, fixing things like that and making sure things like that. And, you know, we do so much preventative work as well. To think of all the audio mistakes that people make or could have made if, you know, we weren't aware of what was going on, or someone didn't remind you of something, or, you know, you didn't have a sound engineer checking things out. It's like the amount of times I've bumped my microphone, or my Bluetooth on my headphones have swapped to my phone, or I get a phone call in the middle of a recording. Like, it is just like, I work set hours, but I'm on call like a lot of the time, and I have been for the last 4 or 5 years, and it is just like tough sometimes to be able to go, I can't, like, how do I clear all the interruptions, and how do I clear all the potential mistakes? And it's taken me to this point to feel comfortable enough to, you know, be somewhere else and just record and not have to worry about things going potentially horribly wrong.
I had another friend of mine who I worked with, she was talking about directing a short film, and it was all volunteer, and so she said the person that was doing on-set mix that day, like, they hadn't really done it before, but they had an idea of how the equipment worked, and she'd said that when she, you know, when they started rolling, she rolled for the day, and then every time they'd cut and they'd do their thing, and she'd be like, is sound rolling? She'd be like, yeah, it sounds rolling. And she realized that after a 14-hour day, the person had never actually cut, and so there was 14 hours of raw audio to go through for the mix that day. But she said it was actually kind of interesting. She was like, okay, I guess I got to just listen to this whole day of filming. And she was like, it was a trip. She's like, because the whole day was just there, and so I had to relive that day again to like find the audio takes I needed.
Funny you say that. I once was speaking to my dad. I was in high school or something, and I must have butt dialed him, and I was sitting at lunch or something and was talking to my friends, and Dad just sat I don't know how long he was sitting there listening. I overheard part of my conversation before he realised I'd butt dialed him. And he turned around to me and he just turned around and he said, the way you communicate with your friends is just not the way I would ever communicate, with my friends. And it was just one of those weird, interactions where, and I've done it too, I've pressed record on a backup recorder that sat at the back of a room or something and listened through the whole thing for a specific moment in sound that wasn't recorded on the main recorder or something. And just realised, oh wait, this is what I sound like. And it's the same with editing your own voice or listening back to your own voice, and you go, shit, is this what I sound like? Is this the kind of way I speak and my cadence and my tone? It's just crazy.
That was actually going back to something you'd said about kind of the learning curves of a podcast and tying it into acting. In my not recording life, I speak very, very fast, and it's just because I grew up in a family of talkers. So if you didn't get your sentence out as fast as possible, you didn't get your words in. And so I have a tendency to speak really, really fast. And I noticed the first few episodes, because when I'm on camera, I can usually control it. Although I have had notes from other directors or people being hey, that was good, just slow it down a bit. But when I was just recording the early episodes, it was just Sean, Rob, and I, and so I was just chatting with my friends, and I would listen back and be oh, I'm speaking really, really fast. I need to control that and actually slow down so people can understand me. And it's something I still catch myself doing every time. Typically, I notice it when I'm it sounds really stupid, but when I'm gonna say something funny, or I think I'm gonna tell a joke, I'll just start rushing my words, and I try and catch it, but it's still something I do to this day that I'm man, I'm still talking fast.
Oh yeah, all the time. I find, and I think this is not a mistake. This is a part of what Australian is. Our accent and our cadence is so dependent on our surroundings. So I catch myself slipping to an American or a Canadian or a British accent when I'm with Canadian, American or British people. I also find myself speaking really fast when I watch really fast TV shows. So something like Gilmore Girls, which one of my favourite TV shows ever, they speak a mile a minute. Amy Sherman-Palladino writes scripts that are so incredibly wordy. They're basically just trying to get through it as fast as possible. And I just when I watch that show, I start talking really fast. When I watch the TV show Scandal, one of Shonda Rhimes' shows, it's really intense, and there's lots of yelling, and there's lots of fast, intense bits of dialogue and monologues. And I caught myself monologuing at my family. I was what am I doing? It's please stop. You've just become insufferable because you've just been monologuing for 5 minutes at people. It was just so good. Not so good, sorry. It was just so fascinating.
Yeah, it's fun, especially working with other actors. People all have their own methods and different approaches. Do you talk in character when you're not in there? Are you gonna keep your accent the whole time? That type of thing. So yeah, again, I find things like that very interesting.
Yeah, it's just so fascinating. Looking towards the future, you've still got a lot of movies to get through. Is there a point that you feel you would be done? Is there a point where you go, we've done all the movies? Are you not counting the new ones, or
Oh no, we've done things. We do have an episode we've recorded for something that isn't even on Disney Plus yet, with the hopes that it will be. And I think that was again, that was part of the funny pitch that Sean, when he pitched it, he's well, the idea is we're never going to be finished. Because at first I thought it was just we're watching all the Disney movies, and then it was oh no, we're watching everything, and we're even toying with the idea of TV shows or episodes of TV shows here and there. Because I, for one, am very excited for the X-Men '97 cartoon that's going to be popping up, because I loved the '90s X-Men cartoon when I was a kid, and partially I think because it was actually a joint production between American and a Canadian studio, and so most of the voice cast was Canadian, and the voice acting was recorded in Toronto, so it was on Canadian television quite a bit because it met Canadian content rules. And so the new reboot of the show, I'm actually very, very excited for. And again, it's we're kind of do we do something on that? Do we talk about it? But then also that's also something we've all kind of chatted about as a group, is that making sure things stay fun, and also making keeping our own pace, and like, we moved into the season model, so we're like still on season 2 right now, and then taking a break just to make sure that it stays fun for everybody.
Yeah. Is there like particular movies that are like ticks on your bucket list that you're really hoping to get?
Our episode that will be coming out on Monday was one that I had always kind of wanted to watch, but one that I'd like just never really thought to do. And again, it all ties back into acting class, which I talk about in the episode. But when I found out the movie I Heart Huckabees was on Disney Plus, I wanted to watch it, not because I heard it was good, but because of all the backstory I'd heard of the drama of like David O. Russell just being like an abusive director, and the like verbal confrontations between him and Lily Tomlin. And the reason it was on my radar is because the same film and acting instructor I had in college mentioned that like his first few days of acting class was basically like, hey, before we even get into doing the work, don't be an asshole. Like, treat people with respect, treat people with dignity. Like, this is all just plain pretend. We're having fun, and like, you don't need to take it so seriously. And then was like, and gave us some examples. And so we watched overnight the movie about the making of Boondock Saints, and then he also played us the David O. Russell audio clips of him and Lily Tomlin screaming at each other. And it was something I'd always wanted to see, to be like, oh, does this live up to it? Is it one of those like situations where it's like, oh, well, he's an asshole director, but the movie's good? Spoiler alert, no.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I just think that there is just so much content out there, and this is one of the things I was very fascinated when I stumbled across your podcast. Was like, I'm like, there are so many movies that I meant to at some point watch, and I've forgotten about, or didn't care enough to think about it, or was not in the right headspace to watch. I just was like, it's just such a fascinating adventure, and one day I'd love to like download the experience of watching them all at the same time. Obviously, that's not necessarily how like that works, but like part of me is like, there's like a lot of TV shows and movies I'm like missed watching as kids, or want to watch and never got around to, or didn't jump on the series bandwagon, and by the time number 2 came round, I'm thinking specifically June at this point, by the time I've come around and going, oh, maybe I'm interested in this, it's it almost feels too late. So it's just such a fascinating part. So yeah, very interesting.
I find the thing I actually find interesting too is especially within our second season, we've actually had quite a bit of listener interaction, and so we just finished a whole month of listener requests, and that's actually really interesting. I've it's been like very touching to like hear feedback from people, but also that people have been like, hey, would you guys mind reviewing this movie? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Or even a few months ago, we reviewed the movie Sunshine, and it was a movie I remember people talking about from college that I just like completely missed, and both Sean and Rob had seen it, and someone in the comments chimed in being like, oh, I loved this movie when I was in college, and we were like, well, I hope you're open to a different interpretation of it.
Yeah, that's the hard thing I think as well. It's like when you watch back things that some people find beloved as well, you've got to be like, your reaction is going to be so different to like what they're looking through, their rose tinted, nostalgia glasses, is that like they are, obviously there's a love for it, but at the same time it's a really, obviously there's critiques to be made. I'm thinking, or like the first 3 Star Wars movies. I have a friend of mine who's watched the first 3 for the first time ever, and it's like ridiculous. She goes like, and she just finished watching all of Lord of the Rings for the first time. She's like, how did they were even allowed to make the Star Wars movies? They're so ridiculous.
Star Wars is a funny one too, because we actually, I like Star Wars is in my blood. Like my mom saw A New Hope in theaters something like 42 times when she was a teenager.
Whoa.
And I was like raised in Star Wars. Like one of my earliest memories of like going to films is cosplaying as, my mom cosplayed as Han Solo. I was Luke, and my mom dressed my sister up as Leia. And we went to the theater that was at the university, and because they were running a marathon of all 3 Star Wars movies, and so that's one of my earliest memories is the family cosplaying as Star Wars characters and going to see the films. And my mom built her own Darth Vader cosplay suit in the 90s when I was in elementary school, and she still wears it sometimes. And so wow. I find it very interesting because like I was and that's, again, like, tying it back in, like, Sean and I, when we were very young, both found out we had a love of Star Wars. And so it's something that's, like, always just been a part of my life. And I'm very fascinated when I meet people that don't like it, or haven't seen it even. Because it's one of those, like, cultural films that, like, I have a friend who just really, really doesn't like it. And, like, and I've kind of said to him, I was like, oh, no, like, I understand you don't have to like it, but it's a very important movie, because up to that point, nobody had ever seen anything like that. It pushed the boundaries of what special effects could be, what you could do in a movie. And I've heard that from people, again, that were my mom's age, that were saying, like, when that lightsaber popped out, we'd never seen anything like that. Like, it just blew everybody away. And so, like, I again, like, I'll never tell anyone, like, what they should or should not like. Like, art is such a subjective thing, and, like, what it means to you is very personal. But it's, like, even acknowledging that, like, this is an important movie, and, like, it paved the way for, like, so many things to happen after it.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think it's just a really fascinating thing is, like, the way people experience media and critique and participate in media discussions. I think it's just a really fascinating part of the way that we talk. I think often we talk about it in terms of nostalgia, and I don't know, it's been very interesting. I've got much younger siblings than me who are experiencing things like, we realized the other day that they had not seen The Emperor's New Groove, and so we had to show them The Emperor's New Groove, my favorite movie as a child, and it was just like, please laugh, because I think I might, you know, but, you know, they're watching it from a completely different context. They've grown up with, like, laptops and stuff. I watched that thing on VHS. I wore out the VHS on it. You know, it was yeah, just such a really interesting, informative experience. Mrs.
Doubtfire was an interesting one for us to do, because we did an episode on it, and I remembered loving that movie as a kid, and then, like, seeing it when I was a little bit older and, like, understanding more of the jokes and being like, oh, okay, like, this movie's funnier than I thought it was as a kid, and then watching it last time for the first time in, like, over a decade, being like, oh, this film has aged terribly. I would never watch this movie ever again.
Yeah. There's just, like, and I think it's like, I hate to say this, but, like, I would wonder what Robin Williams would think about his work today, like, in the context of today. Because I think he did a lot, like, I don't know. I've just got so many interesting, like, if I could, like, resurrect Robin Williams for, like, a day to just, like, chat to him and ask him questions, I would be so curious to see what he thinks. Because he was just such an interesting person. And the way that he acted off screen and on screen, like, often were, like, it almost felt like night and day sometimes to me as well.
Yeah, I heard he worked on a movie in Victoria, I think, for a period of time, and, like, everybody in town had a story about, like, seeing Robin Williams when he was there, or, like, him eating at a restaurant and just getting up on the table and entertaining people, like, and, like, again, like, growing, like, I'll be turning 38 years old, so, like, the 90s were a big Robin Williams time, and that's when he was doing a lot of kids movies, so he's, like, such a staple in, like, so many people's childhoods that, like, yeah, again, like, you would, it is interesting to know, like, what he would be doing. I find it, and, like, again, tying back to Robin Williams, I didn't know it until I was much older that I was like, oh, he also loves The Legend of Zelda, so much so he named his daughter Zelda.
Yeah, that's lovely. It's beautiful. Well, thank you, Bobby, so much for coming on Content and Capable. It's been an absolute blast chatting with you. Time has absolutely flown.
Yeah, I can't believe it's been an hour. I was like, we talked for like 5 minutes, right? We're not done. We got lots more to say.
Where can people find you on the internet?
So you can find us, Podcast War 10 Issues. We're on Facebook, we're on Threads, we're on Instagram at PodWar. You can also find me on social media at Crail_skating. I'm not using Instagram so much these days anyway. It's usually either a skateboard clip of me, like, falling somewhere, or just pictures of the puppy my wife and I recently adopted. I also have a band, the vocalist and bassist in a grindcore band, Egzang, and if you're interested in checking us out there, you can find our debut album, Reactionary Dismemberment, at our record label's Bandcamp, which is Attack with Force Records.
Amazing. Is there anything that you've been reading, watching, listening to that you wanted to plug?
One thing I do want to get out of the way is I do want to say thank you to our Tasmanian fan club. We have a little group of people in Tasmania that are dedicated fans of the show, and so kindly sent us a care package of custom-made mugs and stickers and a map of Tasmania, if only just to prove to us in Canada that Tasmania is in fact a real place.
Oh gosh, the Tasmanians, they're worse than the New Zealanders sometimes.
So shout out to our Tasmanian fan club. You guys brighten our day. My wife and I right now, again, I've been with my wife for, it'll be 22 years this year, and the reason I met her in high school was because she was wearing a Phantom Menace Sebulba t-shirt, and I saw her walking down the hallways, and I was like, oh, that girl likes Star Wars, enough that she's wearing like a shitty Star Wars movie t-shirt. So we're big fans of all the Dave Filoni Star Wars that's going on right now. We're enjoying the last season of The Bad Batch.
Wow, yeah.
Reading, I wish I had more time to read. I need to make more time to read. I've just been reading a lot of books on like how to train puppies and make them have a happy life at a happy home.
Yeah, look, it's a hard one. We inherited a lot of books when we got our puppy just over 10 years ago now. And I think we managed to give all of them away after puppy training was done. But it was like, whoa, there's a lot of books about how to train a dog.
And yeah, and I've been listening to, actually, Your Fine Country of Australia has produced some of my favorite bands. Like Warsaw, Portal, Internal Rot, who's a band I'm listening to a lot right now. Like some really, really great music coming out of your country. So whatever you guys are doing there, like, please keep it up.
Oh, look, I think I don't know whether it's the eternal, like, conversation around being terrified that our music scene is dying. I don't know. It's a very fascinating... I worked in community radio, and the community radio station I worked for a very long time was so supportive of the local music scene. It's just such a fascinating, like, part. You can find me at sam.the.journalist on Instagram and on TikTok. You can find the podcast at Content the Letter N Capable on Instagram. We're also on Facebook and on Threads as well. I'm really only on the Meta stuff at the moment. You've inspired me to plug an Australian artist. And I'm actually going to plug Thelma Plum.
Okay.
She is a Brisbane. She grew up in Byron Bay area, and she's moved up to Brisbane, and she is based out of here and produces the most amazing music. There's one particular song, I've plugged it on this podcast before, called The Brown Snake. It's written about the city of Brisbane because we have nicknamed the Brisbane River the Brown Snake because it's just brown and looks like a bit like a snake. It makes me cry every time, that song. I usually play it as we come into land in Brisbane when I fly home. But I made the decision a couple of months ago to listen to her entire discography, and she's written a lot of music, and it's just really interesting. Some of it's like protesty music because she's Indigenous, but also, some of it's this really like soulful stuff. It was just really great, and I listened to that, and not a month and a half later, I was listening to the entire discography of Taylor Swift for no reason whatsoever. And it was fascinating to draw some of those parallels of, like, obviously, like, Taylor Swift is a massive artist, and Thelma Plum is, like, someone that I like him, is very much an Australian household name. She headlines, like, festivals around the country, but she, like, it just was like the soulful and like that, like, raw emotion in the music and the songwriting, I think was just so interesting. But yeah, check out Thelma Plum, really great, and she just is such an amazing artist.
I'm definitely going to look into that. Thank you for recommending that.
No, yeah. Thank you so much, Bobby, for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute blast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was great.
Content and Capable was recorded, edited, and produced by Samuel O'Brien. You can follow the podcast at Content, the letter N, Capable on Instagram, and you can find it on Facebook. You can also send an email through to contentandcapablepod@gmail.com with any of your thoughts, queries, or concerns. The best way to support the podcast is to leave a review on your preferred podcatcher so more people can hear the podcast. The art was done by Opia, and the music was written, edited, and produced by Jason Hilton. Content and Capable is proud to be a part of the Deus Ex Media Network, where you can find a podcast for any of your nerdy interests.
Charlie, I'm so glad I found you. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. The break was hard, but I'm not injured.
Thank the gods. What do we do now?
Okay, right. I need you to listen to me. There's only one book left. And I know it's going to be hard, but we have to get through it.
I know. Okay, I'm gonna run out and start reading.
Good plan. Okay. I'll start emailing guests.
Charlie, no! You're an introvert!
It's okay. I can do this.
Remember me, Charlie!
I love you, buddy.
For Rick!
Check out Of the Eldest Gods. Episodes every Thursday, now covering Book 5 of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Last Olympian.
Thank you for listening to Content and Capable. Don't forget to rate and review, and we'll see you next week for another episode.
Deus Ex Media.